Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Indie Zone podcast. We're continuing with our reviewing the transcript from the January 23rd closed and sealed hearing in the Idaho versus Koberger case, which was just released to the public on February 21st, 2025. We are on page 113. This is the direct examination of Daniel Hellwig, Hellwig, and it states here, line 23, direct examination by Ms. Taylor. 25, question, good morning. And at the top of the next page, 114, answer, good morning. Question, will you please state your full name? Answer, my name is Daniel Hellwig, first name Daniel, last name Hellwig. Question, what do you do for a living? Answer, I'm currently the forensic director at Intermountain Forensics. We are a 501c3 nonprofit, and our main mission is pushing forward new and cutting-edge DNA technologies, assisting different agencies, law enforcement and otherwise, with education, training, and consultation on those. Our main focus right now is to help fund these cases specifically, and most of our mission is revolved around forensic investigation, genetic genealogy, or FIGG. FIGG, ladies and gentlemen, we've heard this term a few times thus far in this transcript. Forensic Investigative Genetic Genealogy, FIGG. Continue on. Question, when you say help fund these cases as a nonprofit, what do you mean? Answer, a variety of different. We actually allow people to submit cases that they may be having problems getting the revenue and resources to move it forward, and then we evaluate it. So this could be, we've worked and tried to assist, and mainly I think most of our work is in smaller agencies that don't have nearly as much resources to further their casework with this technology. But we've done work with, and we're now at the bottom of page 114 into 115, law enforcement, medical examiners' offices, defense, especially the Innocence Project. Line 3, question, what did you do before you worked at this nonprofit? Answer, I've been in forensic DNA for 20 plus years. I have a bachelor's in biology and a chemistry from VII University and a master's in forensic science from Marshall University. I started my career at the Armed Forces DNA Identification Laboratory as an intern there and moved on to various public laboratories. I worked in forensic DNA at New Mexico Department of Public Safety and the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. I then started in the private sector. I worked for Sorensen Forensics in Salt Lake City, Utah, and a variety of different jobs there. Initially, I was the DNA technical leader, essentially the quality manager of the DNA section, but moved into executive management at the laboratory director. In 2019, I began with Intermountain Forensics as a founder. I'll refer to that sometimes as IMF. We were, up until July of last year, our mission was not only funding cases, education, outreach, but also we established and operated a fully functioning forensic DNA lab. Our mission is that, we're at the bottom of 115 into 116. Realm was to, again, continue with cutting-edge DNA technology, and specifically we sought out to operate and utilize a forensic investigative genetic genealogy support laboratory. Question, what does that mean? Answer, so our goal is this. We had a fully functioning laboratory in that we did what I'll call traditional forensics, STRs, as mentioned previously, but we also wanted to implement this new technology, forensic investigative genetic genealogy, and laboratory possesses behind it. Specifically in this case, you're talking about forensic SNPs, single nucleotide polymorphisms. The court reporter, I'm sorry, witness, single, and I'm going to spell this here, NUCLEOTIDE, polymorphism, POLYMORPHISMS. The court, so you need to slow down a little bit. You don't enunciate particularly well, and so you need to go slower. So the court has now let this witness know, please slow down. You don't enunciate well. Please slow down with your testimony. The witness, I promise. Ms. Taylor, let me see if I can understand your work right before the 501c3, getting into the forensic investigative genetic and genealogy world. Do I understand that your work was to do the part, all the long steps, until you get to the bottom of 116 to 117, SNP, and then it would be handed off for a genealogist to do the other part of the work? Answer. Beyond just identifying SNPs, it is to generate an upload profile, an end product that would then be handed off to an investigative genetic genealogist to continue that research. So essentially, our laboratory had the ability to start from sample, from evidentiary item, do DNA extraction, which is essentially popping cells open, pulling DNA out, and washing all the residual material away. And then traditional forensics, where you're doing short tandem repeats, repetitive DNA that repeats over and over, and you simply count them to our specific targets, which was SNPs, where we did DNA sequencing, looking at all the different letters within that genome and pulling out the relevant single nucleotide polymorphisms that were specifically associated through genealogy, generating through a pretty extensive process, what I'll call an upload file. These are files that contain all of these SNPs, single nucleotide polymorphisms, that contain the information that is needed for upload into these databases. Question, okay, I'm going to go back a little bit with you. So in the traditional STR, we've heard some about that today. You said splitting the bottom of 117 into 118, DNA open and washing it? Answer, yes. That's essentially the very simplified version of DNA extraction. You can think of this biological material, these cells, as little tiny water-filled balloons with nuclear material, with DNA inside of it. DNA extraction, similar to previous testimony, is just popping those cells open, pulling the DNA out and washing all the cellular garbage, if you will, out to generate and extract. It can then go down several different pathways depending on what you need. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to point out here that he is now, this is, I believe, the second time that we've reviewed this transcript where he is referring to an earlier witness's testimony. And this is not always done. What a lot of courts do is to leave other witnesses out in the hallway and have them called in after witness A has testified. Then witness B gets on the stand, but it appears here that the court did, and it did say early in the transcript that the witnesses would all be permitted to stay in the room. So we're going through now, we're at line 7. I want to repeat, DNA extraction, similar to previous testimony, is just popping open those cells, pulling the DNA out, and washing all the cellular garbage, if you will, out to generate an extract. It can then go down several different pathways depending on what you need. Traditional forensic testing, STRs, short tandem repeats, is taking that DNA and looking at repetitive sequences and counting how many repeats are there. The best way I can explain this is if you had the word cat in quotes, ladies and gentlemen, and that was the specific DNA letters that you were looking for, you could repeat that word, cat, quote. Again, ladies and gentlemen, he says the word cat, quote, 8 times. That would be a short tandem repeat. Cat repeated 8 times. I would call that an 8. You have DNA from mom and dad. So you have 2 copies of this. So you have 8 and maybe another 8 from mom and dad. The problem there is you're not actually looking at the specific letters. So a 3-letter word like DOG, dog, at the bottom of 118 going into 119, ladies and gentlemen, would be completely different. We've got an 8 repeat STR and an 8 repeat STR that have different sequences but still have the same short tandem repeat number. SMP, single nucleotide polymorphisms, is actually looking at the DNA sequence. So if we were to look at an SMP, let's say we were particularly interested in the A in cat, and ladies and gentlemen, please note, line 8, A is in quotes and cat is in quotes. We would sequence that DNA and go into that sequence and say at this location we have a quote A and we have an quote A from mom and maybe an A, again in quotes, from dad. That is the generation of an SMP profile, same concept, but we're dialing down to the specific letter in question. Quote, question, have you done both kinds of work? Answer, yes. In my before IMF, I worked at several different laboratories, all using traditional forensics, STRs and YSTRs. In my work at Intermountain Forensics, we did that, but we also focused on forensic SMP testing. Question, if I understand the part about the water balloon right, it's one water balloon, same process of popping it open, stripping out the stuff you don't need, and then it's where you go from there that makes the difference between an STR and an SMP. Ultimately, and now we're at the top of page 120 of 175. Answer, correct. It's all associating to the same DNA extract, and that's similar to what the Idaho State Police Lab does as well. Question. So the process of getting that DNA water balloon open so that you can strip things off, does it matter how you do that? Answer. Well, there's a variety of different ways to do that. But in forensics, there's some specific and kind of common tools that we use that the process to get there can vary somewhat. However, it's fairly standard practice to use some of the same tools within the forensic DNA community. Question. I think I understand the repeats as looking for patterns, but the SNP is looking at the individual characteristics? Answer. Individual letter, nucleotide. So if DNA is made up of billions and billions of letters, STR is looking at repetitive sequences and counting the repeats. And SNPs is looking at specific letters, specific nucleotides on that genome. Question by Ms. Taylor. All right, I want to ask about that whole process. How do you get from an SMP to splitting the water balloon open? I'm with you there. So what do we do after we get that stripped off? We are on the last line, ladies and gentlemen, of page 120 of the transcript. Line 25, and he's going to be going into the next page with this answer. Answer, if we're going down the path of forensic SNPs, there's a few different ways you can do that. There's one way that is essentially a targeted practice. We're looking at SNPs in question, and we're going to focus on those SNPs and do what is called an amplification PCR, basically a DNA photocopier of that sequence, that specific letter, and a little bit around it to specifically target an SMP in question. This is now line 9. The other technique is something more attuned to whole genome sequencing. Again, there's a variety of different ways you can do this, but the idea here is we're going to sequence the entire genome, the entire length of DNA on this particular extract, and then we are going to pull out the SNPs that we need, the relevant ones that we're looking for. This can be done. I will refer to that as whole genome sequencing, acknowledging the fact that there's a variety of different ways you can accomplish that. Once you sequence the DNA, it comes out off of the instrument in question, and there are several different instruments you can use, but for the most part, it turns into raw data, and that raw data is typically found in a file called a FASTQ file. This raw data is massive. It has an insane amount. We're at the bottom of page 121, going into 122, information, and it's not refined in a way that we can actually utilize it. Line 3. So the steps from taking that raw data to actually getting that upload file, that end product, for upload into these databases is bioinformatics, essentially a software that goes into this massive amounts of data and pulls out the things that we're looking for. Question: is all software the same, or all bioinformatics programs, is that all the same? Answer: no. Each, as far as I can tell, each laboratory has their own version of bioinformatics that they use to get from sequence data into usable results. Question: if I understand where we are, we popped open the balloon. We put the DNA into a sequencer, created a raw data file called a FASTQ file, and now we need to do bioinformatics to get a SNP. 19. Answer: right. Question: okay, what happens from there? Answer: so in the bioinformatic pathway, you're doing multiple things. Again, you can think of this as a DNA sequence that the sequencer has given you a truckload of information. They're essentially puzzle pieces. The first thing we are going to do is, and we're at the bottom of 122 into 123, reemerging. So we are going to take all the puzzle pieces that are the same, and we're going to use them to paint the best picture of that information. You can think of this as we're sequencing this DNA, this human genome, multiple times, hopefully 10, 15, 30 times. Our samples in forensics are typically difficult, so we don't tend to get that level of, essentially, we are trying to sequence this entire genome multiple times to add more context in what we're getting, ladies and gentlemen. We are now again at the top of page 123. And this is very lengthy testimony from this witness. He is providing information into their policies, their practices, their procedures regarding DNA testing. We're going to continue on line 14. Well, we still have puzzle pieces to put together. The next thing is mapping. The bioinformation pathway will map all of these puzzle pieces and put them into the human genome in the way that they're supposed to be. That takes multiple fragments and lines them up in the right manner. Once it's mapped, we are going to start to be able to find the particular SNPs that we're looking for. We have a human genome with a whole bunch of different letters in different positions. We can say, all right, these are the relevant SNPs that we're looking for. Genealogy-based information markers. We want to pull the bottom of page 123, top of page 124. We want to pull these SNPs out, see what the call is there, and send that up to an upload file. In some cases, we don't have all of the information. We're missing some sequence data. We've maybe gotten 80% of the genome, and some of the SNPs are missing. There's a process to fill in those gaps called imputation. Imputation is in most bioinformatic packages. Essentially, we know what the letters are in front of this particular spot we're missing, and we know what the letters are behind this particular spot that is missing. So we can look at all the human genomes and impute, estimate the most likely letter in the position that we're looking for. Once we're through imputation and allele calls, we're going to use this bioinformatic package to pull out SNPs that we're looking for and put them into a format that will be usable for upload into these databases. At IMF, we actually generated 2 files, one specifically to the GEDmatch Pro database and one specific to the family tree FTDNA database. He continues on. We're at line 21, page 124, ladies and gentlemen. In these files, GEDmatch Pro, we typically got around 550,000 plus SNPs that we were looking for, and the family tree DNA database upwards of 600 to 650,000 SNPs. The end product there, though, is a text file or some sort of upload file, which, and we're going on to the next page, could be used in text format or Excel format. But essentially, What it is a file with all of these SNPs, the calls at the SNP location, in a format that allows them to be uploaded into the database. At this point, we hand it off to an investigative genetic genealogist to do the research. Question. The upload database, as you mentioned, to GEDmatch Pro and Family Tree DNA? Answer, that's correct. Why did you mention those? Answer, those are the two databases that allow law enforcement searches. Again, those are the two databases that allow law enforcement searches. They have specific terms or service that gives a portion of that database. Those that have consented to do so to law enforcement to search in for human remains in some cases and in criminal cases. Question. So in this lab process to get to the SNP, to get to the upload file, it sounds like there's a lot of steps along the way. Answer. It's a pretty complicated process, yes. Question. Is it important to keep lab notes or bench notes or to have procedures or protocols? Answer. Yes, and I think it's pretty standard practices amongst forensic DNA testing laboratories in general. You're going to adhere to A, at the bottom of page 125, going into 126, quality management system. You're going to have procedures, protocols, and policies that tell you what to do, tell you how to do it, tell you what samples to use, what personnel can do the analysis and technical review, and so on and so forth. It is a whole quality structure that gives support and credence to reliable results, and that would include protocols, SOPs, it would include case documentation, laboratory notes about what you did, how you did it, chain of custody documents, electronic records as needed, and hopefully at the end of it, a report that includes conclusions and information about what was done. Question. Why do you want to do all that? Answer, first of all, within the forensic DNA community, it's a part of our accreditation process and some of these standards that we adhere to as a community. Second, it's just best practice. The holding of the records, using them, creating them, and retaining them, you never know if you're going to need or refer back to them in your notes, or we mandate a technical review of all of this data. So a second quality analyst will look all over your laboratory notes, all the work you did and your reports, and make sure that they agree with it and would come out to the same conclusions and for a discovery request. End of page 126, ladies and gentlemen. We're continuing on 127 and the witness continues. At IMF, we have typical documentation that we would send to our clients that would include a report and all of the case notes and laboratory documentation associated with that. Outside of that, we oftentimes get requests for more than that information. What is our validations? What is our quality manual, competency test for our personnel, their training and education, a whole list of support documents that are within our quality management system that also are important in accreditation of our laboratory. Question. Before you came a 501c3, what was your laboratory accredited? Answer. Even previous to becoming a 501c3, since the inception of the company in 2019, even before we no longer did laboratory operations, we got accredited by ANAB ISO 17025. That was on our accreditation scope, including traditional forensics, STRs, YSTRs, and eventually we included within our scope forensics SNPs, massively parallel sequencing that encompasses accreditation for this whole genome. Sequencing in support of forensic investigative genetic genealogy that we did. Question, this is line 24, the bottom of page 127. Is there a set of guidelines or rules that apply to work with DNA to split that DNA water balloon open? That question ended. Next page, line 1. Answer, line 2, yes. And I think you've heard testimony to that. There's accreditation standards. ISO 17025 is the big one, as well as the Federal Bureau of Investigation Quality Assurance Standards for forensic DNA testing laboratories. Those are common, I would say, more so almost required within the forensic DNA community. And those are standards that dictate our quality management system as a whole, what we do, how we do it, how we support it, how we document, and how we report it. Question. Is that important so there's public trust in what you do? Answer, more so. Public trust for sure, but reliability and reproducibility of results. Transparency and just ensuring a full quality behind your conclusions and reports. Ms. Taylor continues line 18 with this question. Mr. Hellwig, you mentioned the size of the two S&P profiles for GEDmatch Pro and Family Tree DNA, 550,000 or 650,000 seem to be the maximums. If you had a case where you produced a file to upload, an upload file, and it had, let's say, 600,000 in it, could you take that text file and turn it into twice that big? Line 25. He's going to go into the next page with this response. We're at the bottom of page 128, going into 129, and Mr. Hellwig answers, I'm not sure how we would do that. No. An important note here was just IMF's policy. We generated upload files specific to each one of those databases, and that's the number we had within our bioinformatic package. That's not necessarily what would be true of others. That's being said, if theoretically we were to deliver our upload file to our client and it, say, had 500,000 SNPs on it, I don't know of a mechanism to add SNPs to that manner without going back to our raw data. In this particular case, I know you haven't gotten involved in all of the ins and outs, but did we provide to you what we received in regular discovery, the Othram file and the FBI file, upload files? Answer. Yes, I did receive two upload files. One was a text file that came from Othram Labs, and one was an Excel file that came from the feds. Question, is that also an upload file? Answer, yep, both of them are upload files. They contain exactly that, a listing of SNPs, the call, and their location in a format that would allow them to be uploaded to databases. Just want to break here for an observation. We do not have conclusive testimony yet who Mr. Hellwig's company, his not-for-profit, was assisting, but it just seems as though from what he is giving us, if we read between the lines, that it would be the state, ISP, Moscow Police Department, and the agencies basically that the Moscow Police Department brought in to assist them in the investigation of this horrendous crime that occurred at 1122 King Road. We're going to continue on line 23. What was the difference in size? A, the Fed's file had significantly more S&Ps called them than the Othram file. I wasn't able, and we're at the bottom of page 129 going into 130. I wasn't able to go deep into it. I don't know exactly how many more, but there were more SMPs called within the upload file for the feds than there was with the Othram file. Question, and since the Othram file is smaller and it's a text file, can you tell how the feds got so many more data, so many more SMPs? Answer, no. That's kind of the important part here. There's no documentation to say how this happened. And that's really the important part, right? I have no reason to believe that Othram Laboratories did anything wrong to obtain their profile. I just don't have the documentation to show me how that came to be. Same with the FBI file. There's no documentation or notes or bench or report to say, this is what I have. This is what I did, and this is now what I have. So I'm unsure of how that came to be. Ms. Taylor, thank you. Your Honor, if I may just have a moment to check with my team. Mr. Hellwig, that's all I have. The prosecutor may have something for you. The court, line 22, go ahead. Cross-examination. So we see that Mr. Nye does have some questions to ask Mr. Hellwig. The bottom of page 130, lines 24 and 25. Cross-examination by Mr. Nye going into 131. Mr. Hellwig, I want to start with your accreditation testimony. Did I hear you correctly that your lab was accredited since inception in 2019? Answer, our laboratory was accredited for traditional forensics. We began the accreditation in 2019, and I believe the first accreditation scope we received in 2020. For forensics SMPs, our accreditation was January 20th of 2023, I believe. Question, so you weren't accredited back in 2019 for forensic SMPs, correct? Answer, correct. We weren't actually doing forensic SMPs at the time. Question, but you were working on forensic SMP cases prior to your accreditation, correct? Answer, no. We specifically reserved working on these SMP cases until we received our accreditation. Question, okay, do you recall describing the accreditation process as a chicken and egg problem? Answer, I don't. Question, you testified you worked at or work for Intermountain Forensics. Answer, that's correct. Question, do you post on their website? Answer, sometimes, yeah. The bottom of page 131 going into 132. Question, do you post in your name, Daniel Hellwig? Answer, certainly. Question, you don't recall posting in June of 2020 about accreditation being a chicken and egg problem? Answer, I don't recall. I'm certain that statement is on there and I would need to recollect certainly. Question, I'm happy to show this to you. Answer, that would be great. Ms. Taylor, may I also see it? Mr. Nye, sure. Document handed to the witness. The witness, yes, yeah, I recall that, by Mr. Nye. Okay, so do you now recall describing accreditation as a chicken and egg problem? Answer, absolutely. It was several years ago. I appreciate that refresh of my memory. Question, sure. In that same post, you talked about how you appreciated the trust of those that were using you before you were accredited, right? Answer, correct, yes. Bottom of page 132 going into 133. Do you feel like your work before accreditation was less, a lower quality than after accreditation? Answer, no, absolutely not. Question, I would also like to talk to you about you. Mention that Intermountain Forensics does, or at least used to do some cases like this, right? Answer, yes. Question, assisting law enforcement? Answer, correct, yes. Roughly how many cases did you assist law enforcement in is the next question. Answer, that's a good question. We have a running total there, but I'm guessing in the hundreds. Question, okay. And what was your role personally in assisting law enforcement in these cases? Answer, I had several. I did consultations up front. I was qualified as an analyst for forensic SMPs. I did some technical review, and in some cases, I distributed files to our client. Question, and when you say in the hundreds, you mean you went through that whole process you talked about with Ms. Taylor in hundreds of cases? Answer, yes. Bottom of page 133 going into 134. Question, developing an SMP profile? Answer, I believe so, yes. Question, okay. And in all of those cases, were you successful in developing a SMP profile? Answer, no. In roughly how many cases were you successful in developing an SMP profile? Answer, we were about, at the end of laboratory operations, we were about 80%, somewhere in that range. Question, so 80% of hundreds? Answer, yes, I believe so. Question, in the cases you successfully developed an SMP profile, did you learn medical information about the individuals whose DNA you were looking at? Answer, no. Question, did anyone at Intermountain Forensics learn medical information about those people? Answer, no. Question, when you develop, I believe you called it an upload file. Is that correct? Answer, correct. Question, what does an upload file look like if you just open it on a computer? Answer, it's a text file, a very, very big, bottom of page 134 going into 135. Again, it comes in different formats, but essentially what it is a text file. It is a big text file that has hundreds of thousands, in our case of SMPs, that have a position, a name, that chromosome they're found on, and the actual letters that we're looking for. So if you provided that upload file to someone that didn't have any training or experience in genetics, would they be able to read it? Answer, no. Not in so many words. There's some headers on there, I guess, that would be narrative. For the molecular biology, would be pretty complicated. Question. So let me ask it this way, I guess. If you were to hand that upload file to your average police officer and ask them whether or not the person whose DNA you are looking at would have cancer, could that officer be able to do that? Answer, no. Question. What additional steps would you need to take to learn medical information from an SMP profile above and beyond what you were doing at Intermountain Forensics? Answer, well, SMPs are information to a variety of different things. So what we're looking for is genealogy informative marking or ancestry links. Bottom of page 135, going into 136 of informative markers. To find health information or phenotypical like hair color, eye color, you need to look at different SNPs. There's a horde of research on what medical information is out there and what SNPs are probative. To gain access to those SNPs, you would have to go back into the bioinformatics, pull the information from the law data specific to the medical SNPs that you're looking for. That's not something we did at IMF. Question. So if I'm understanding correctly, at IMF, you developed SNP profiles that were specific for ancestry. Answer. Genealogy and ancestry, yes. Question. Why didn't you develop SNPs related to medical information? Answer. That's not part of our scope. We are a forensic DNA testing laboratory. We're generating FIGG profiles for the support and upload into these genealogy databases. It wouldn't be relevant nor probative nor appropriate. Question. Did you, when you helped these law enforcement agencies, did you ever follow these cases to see if there were more successes at the end? Answer. Sometimes we delivered files to our partners. In some cases, we had an investigative genetic genealogy team that worked the cases on the investigative side. But in some cases, our clients would come back to us and let us know that they've gotten a result or that they've had a case resolution. Question. And you participate in, I don't know exactly what you called it, in the FIGG community. Would you consider yourself a member of the FIGG community? Answer, I guess, yeah. There's a variety of different groups, I guess, and message boards and information pathways, and I try to be part of it when I can. Question. As a member of the FIGG community, did you hear about the other people's success stories using FIGG? Answer, absolutely. Question. Have you ever heard of an FIGG case that was successfully solved using medical information? Answer, no, never. Mr. Nye, just 1 second, Your Honor. No further questions. The court, any redirect? Ms. Taylor, yes, thank you. So Ms. Taylor is going to now ask some follow-up questions of this witness. We're at the bottom of 137, going into 138. This is now redirect examination by Ms. Taylor. Question, full genome sequencing is the whole genome anything. Is that what that means? Answer, yes. The whole genome sequence is the attempt to sequence the entire genome if possible. Now I heard you talking to the prosecutor about what you didn't look at with medical information, but I thought I heard you talk about when you got down to the SMP, those SMPs weren't called from the whole genome. Did I hear that right? Answer, I would have to rephrase that a little bit. Question, please do. Answer, when we're dealing with the whole genome sequencing, we're attempting to sequence the entire genome, and then it turns into that raw file, that FASTQ file that I mentioned before. Now, the next step is the bioinformatic pathway. The bioinformatic pathway is going to be targeting specific SNPs in question that we want to solve the question for. We want to answer the question for. In our case, these are genetic genealogy or ancestry informative markers. Those SNPs that provide information for genealogy and ancestry. The bioinformatics that we use at IMF, we're at the bottom of 138 going into 139, would be specifically targeting those particular SNPs, but the raw data, the sequence data, still has the entire list of SNPs. We just aren't pulling that piece of information out. Question. So if you handed me a case with your notes, protocols, and procedures, I could look at what you did at the whole genome sequencing and know that you were targeting only genealogy SNPs. Would that be fair to say? Answer. With the right knowledge base, yes. The list of SNPs are included. Where they are and the name on the upload file are all there. You can do the research to look at that and say, okay, these are the genealogy or ancestry informative markers. Question. If I had a file with notes that talked about how bioinformatics was used, what to produce, what kind of SNPs to produce, and handed it to somebody like you, could you tell me these are the ones that go to ancestry issues, that go to genealogy issues? If I had the notes from somebody else, answer, I would have to do some research, to be honest with you. The SNPs in question that we're using are all derived from these genealogy databases. So it's the GEDmatch Pro, Family Tree DNA, Ancestry.com. These are the ones who have decided, bottom of 139 going into 140, which SMPs to use. And we just use them as a tool. So what is the SMPs that best upload into the Family Tree DNA Law Enforcement Database or GEDmatch Pro? And so when we are bioinformatically pulling out the SMPs, we're doing so under the direction of what they want from us. Could I determine if there's medical information within those SMPs or SMPs with medical information? Yes, but it would be a lot of research. Question. I just have a couple of questions for you about what the prosecutor talked about besides that. He asked you about the chicken and egg problem and different cases you've done and the hundreds of cases that you've done before. You told us that it's important to have protocols and procedures and keep your information. Keep your notes. Did you do that in those cases? Then the answer here, and we're at line 17, ladies and gentlemen. Answer, oh yes, within the quality management system as a whole, and adhering to our procedures and protocols, and the accreditation standard that we derive to, it's all that. It's case documentation, laboratory report, and then the foundation behind it. Validation summaries, competency testing for personnel, their education requirements, all that has been done in those cases and adhered to in our own internal policies. Bottom of page 140, going into 141. Question, thank you. That's it for me. The court, thank you. You can step down. Does the defense have any other witnesses? Your Honor, for the IGG, I have one other witness this morning. How long is that one? Ms. Taylor, I think she's going to take a little bit longer. The court, let's take a 30-ish minute break for lunch. So this is the point that the morning's activities with respect to the closed sealed hearing ended, a 30-minute lunch break, and then we're going to come back with the last witness of the day, who is Leah Larkin. She testified when the matter was in Latah County before Judge John Judge. So this is the second time that the public is going to be seeing her on the stand, or at least reading a transcript from her being on the stand. This will now conclude this episode of the Indie Zone special series, looking at the transcript from the closed sealed hearing, January 23rd, 2025. My name is Kathy. Thank you for joining us here today.